This video is for Night by Elie Wiesel, Chapter 3, Part 1, which is the first 9 pages of this chapter. So if you look at the chart on this slide, we've got the information given and the annotations required. There is a statement made on the first page, men to the left, women to the right. When you come to this statement, I want your reactions, thoughts, and or questions to the statement itself and statements and events after this. There are also 2 examples for sure of small kindnesses that we'll see in this, the first part of this chapter. So, what I want you to answer is 1, identify the small kindnesses that we notice, and 2, I want you to be able to express the impact that these small kindnesses have for Elie and his father. The third thing that I want you to look at and make annotations over um, is the changes in Elie Wiesel's faith. So I want you to look at how his faith changes in the first part of this chapter. Okay, and remember, I will guide you. You can pause this video as you need to, and then continue when you're ready. So don't let my speed put you behind. Okay, go at your own pace. Okay, I'm going to begin reading now. The beloved objects that we had carried with us from place to place were now left behind in the wagon, and with them, finally, our illusions. Think about that. Remember when they were in the ghetto, it said that the ghetto was ruled neither by German nor Jew, but by delusion, right? So now Elie Wiesel is acknowledging that now their illusions, their delusion has been left behind with all of those physical belongings. Okay? Every few yards there stood an SS man, his machine gun trained on us. Hand in hand, we followed the throng. An SS came toward us wielding a club. He commanded, "Men to the left, women to the right." So here's that statement that I told you to look out for, right? So, what do you think the purpose of them separating the men from the women is, right? We don't know yet, but there is a purpose. So, what do you think that is? 8 words spoken quietly, indifferently, without emotion. 8 simple, short words. Look at that sentence. 8 simple, short words. Is it an actual sentence? Does it have a subject and a verb? Is it a complete thought? I want you to write something about that down, okay? Highlight that sentence, make a note by it. We are going to come back to that in class, okay? So even if you're doing the guided readings, I'm going to give you information that is not on the chart that will benefit you for in-class discussion. So pay attention to those hints as you go through the video. Yet that was the moment when I left my mother. There was no time to think, and I already felt my father's hand press against mine. We were alone. Alone in with they came with 80 people, right? But we know there are more once they got there, but yet he makes a statement, we were alone. In a fraction of a second, I could see my mother, my sisters, move to the right. Zipporah was holding Mother's hand. I saw them walking farther and farther away. Mother was stroking my sister's blonde hair, as if to protect her, and I walked on with my father, with the men. I didn't know that this was the moment in time and the place where I was leaving my mother and Zipporah forever. I kept walking, my father holding my hand. So I want you to think about this word forever and what it really means and what does it mean here. And I want you to just jot some notes about that. Okay, what is your thought on that? Okay, next page. Behind me, an old man fell to the ground. Nearby, an SS man replaced his revolver in its holster. My hand tightened its grip on my father. All I could think of was not to lose him, not to remain alone. The SS officers gave the order. Form ranks of fives. There was a tumult. It was imperative to stay together. Hey, kid, how old are you? The man interrogating me was an inmate. I could not see his face, but his voice was weary and warm. 15? No, you're 18. But I'm not, I said. I'm 15. Fool, listen to what I say. Then he asked my father, who answered, I'm 50. No, the man now sounded angry. Not 50. You're 40. Do you hear? 18 and 40. Okay, so why is this inmate trying to help him, do you think? Okay, you can highlight pieces of evidence here for your reaction, right? And why is this going to be important later on, do you think? Okay, I'm going to continue. He disappeared into the darkness. Another inmate appeared, unleashing a stream of invectives. Sons of, why have you come here? Tell me, why? Someone dared to reply. What do you think? That we came here of our own free will? That we asked to come here? The other seemed ready to kill him. Shut up, you moron, or I'll tear you to pieces. You should have hanged yourselves rather than come here. Didn't you know what was in store for you here in Auschwitz? You didn't know? In 1944? True, we didn't know. Nobody had told us. He couldn't believe his ears. His tone became even harsher. So let's go back to chapter 1, okay? And there how life kept returning to normal, right? Things would happen, life would return to normal. They would forget. They didn't want to believe things that they heard. But we know there was no talk that they heard of um, the crematorias, right? We know we didn't hear about that, right? Moish the beetle gave um, a lot of evidence in his story that told them they should leave, right? They should do something, and they didn't, right? But what were the other signs that they should have paid attention to? Think about those things, right? And but if you think about too the the technology that was available and the way news traveled and the pace that it traveled, and I mean, how could they have known, right? But this inmate, he's like in 1944, right? It's been going on. We know for at least 4, almost 5 years that they have been bringing the Jews into the concentration camps. So he's like, how do you not know this already? Like, right? So now we'll continue. He says, over there, do you see the chimney over there? Do you see it? And the flames, do you see them? Yes, we saw the flames. Over there, that's where they will take you. Over there will be your grave. You still don't understand? You sons of. Don't you understand anything? You will be burned, burned to a cinder, turned into ashes. His anger changed into fury. We stood stunned, petrified. Could this be just a nightmare? An unimaginable nightmare? I heard whispers around me. We must do something. We can't let them kill us like that, like cattle in the slaughterhouse. We must revolt. There were among us a few tough young men. They actually had knives and were urging us to attack the armed guards. One of them was muttering, let the world learn about the existence of Auschwitz. Let everybody find out about it while they still have a chance to escape. But the older men begged their sons not to be foolish. We mustn't give up hope, even now as the sword hangs over our heads. So taught our sages. A sage is like a wise mentor. That's what they're referring to. Uh, when I read this and hear them talk of revolt now at this time when they're at Auschwitz, right? Why didn't they talk about it back there in the ghettos? Uh, I'm thinking it would have been easier for them to revolt in the ghettos, but why do you think they didn't, right? This is just another point for us to think about um, as we continue to read this story. Okay, um, I'm going to continue. The wind of revolt died down. We continued to walk until we came to a crossroads. Standing in the middle of it was, though I didn't know it then, Dr. Mengele, the notorious Dr. Mengele. He looked like the typical SS officer, a cruel, though not unintelligent, face, complete with monocle, the one-eyed glasses. He was holding a conductor's baton and was surrounded by officers. The baton was moving constantly, sometimes to the right, sometimes to the left. In no time, I stood before him. "Your age?" he asked, perhaps trying to sound paternal. "I'm 18." My voice was trembling. "In good health?" "Yes." "Your profession?" Next page. Tell him that I was a student? "Farmer," I heard myself saying. This conversation lasted no more than a few seconds. It seemed like an eternity. The baton pointed to the left. I took half a step forward. I first wanted to see where they would send my father. Were he to have gone to the right, I would have run after him. The baton once more moved to the left. A weight lifted from my heart. When I read this sentence, I made an annotation just recording my own reaction to this, right? That I'm so glad that they moved together so that Elie did not feel alone, which is one of the things he was worried about in, the second page of this chapter. We did not know as yet which was the better side, right or left, which road led to prison and which to the crematoria. Still, I was happy. I was near my father. Our procession continued slowly to move forward. Another inmate came over to us. "Satisfied?" "Yes," someone answered. "Poor devils, you are heading for the crematorium." He seemed to be telling the truth. Not far from us, flames, huge flames, were rising from a ditch. Something was being burned there. A truck drew close and unloaded its hold. Small children, babies. Yes, I did see this with my own eyes. Children thrown into the flames. Is it any wonder that ever since then sleep tends to elude me? Right? When we see this statement, when we read this statement right here, we know that even though this whole experience changed him, this moment right here had a profound change on him as well. And it's important to note that and write that down. In my book, I underlined the phrase sleep tends to elude me and just put a quick note changed him, right? Because the changes that we see along the way in this memoir are important for us, right? Remember, you're going to write your own memoir at the end of this unit. And as you decide what you're going to write about, I want you to think about moments that where your audience is going to be able to see and you will be able to express when and where and how you were changed. Okay? I'm going to continue. So that was where we were going. A little farther on, there was another, larger pit for adults. I pinched myself. Was I still alive? Was I awake? How was it possible that men, women, and children were being burned and that the world kept silent? No, all this could not be real. A nightmare, perhaps. Soon I would wake up with a start, my heart pounding, and find that I was back in the room of my childhood with my books. My father's voice tore me from my daydreams. Next page. What a shame that you did not go with your mother. I saw many children your age go with their mothers. His voice was terribly sad. I understood that he did not wish to see what they would do to me. He did not wish to see his only son go up in flames. Okay, look, um, this part right here, okay, when we go back to the first page when it says men to the left, women to the right, okay, and then we're looking at events that happen after this, right? We still see the continued separation, right? It's constantly to the left or to the right. Next phase, you're going this way, you're going that way. But we know from his first statement that where his mother and his sisters went, um, it's a good thing that Elie Wiesel did not go there, or we wouldn't have the story that we're reading, right? But this statement, he did not wish to see his only son go up in flames. So we know that tells us, and we don't know if Elie knew that then or if this is a reflective statement to where now he knows, right? What happened with his mother and his sisters. And so as he makes the statement, is it because, is it reflective or is it he realized in that moment? Okay. All right. I'm going to continue. My forehead was covered with cold sweat. Still, I told him that I could not believe that human beings were being burned in our times. The world would never tolerate such crimes. The world? The world is not interested in us. Today, everything is possible, even the crematoria. His voice broke. Father, I said, if that is true, then I don't want to wait. I'll run into the electrified barbed wire. That would be easier than a slow death in the flames. He didn't answer. He was weeping. His body was shaking. Everybody around us was weeping. Now, if you think back to how Elie Wiesel described his father in chapter 1, right? He described him as cultured, unsentimental, he did not display his feelings, and he cared more about the welfare of others than that of his own kin. We see repeatedly why Elie Wiesel setting that impression of his father up in chapter 1 like that is important even now, right? Because we see him weeping, his body was shaking. Here, he cannot contain his emotions, right? So, and it says, everybody around us was weeping. Someone began to recite Kaddish, the prayer for the dead. I don't know whether, during the history of the Jewish people, men have ever before recited Kaddish for themselves, right? So this telling us they knew now that they were going to die, probably. Okay. Um, I do not know how to say the Kaddish, but I'm going to give it my best shot here. Yizgadal Be'eskadash Shmei Rabbah. May his name be celebrated and sanctified, whispered my father. For the first time, I felt anger rising within me. Why should I sanctify his name? The Almighty, the eternal and terrible Master of the universe, chose to be silent. What was there to thank him for? Right? So I want you to highlight here because we see him questioning his faith right now when he had been so devout up until this point, right? But now we see him. Why should I sanctify his name? He chose to be silent, right? So this is important to note, right? In the information given, I put the changes in faith. This is where we see that explicitly mentioned. We continued our march. We were coming closer and closer to the pit, from which an infernal heat was rising. 20 more steps. If I was going to kill myself, this was the time. Our column had only some 15 steps to go. I bit my lip so that my father would not hear my teeth chattering. 10 more steps. 8. 7. We were walking slowly as one follows a hearse, our own funeral procession. Only 4 more steps. 3. There it was now, very close to us, the pit and its flames. I gathered all that remained of my strength in order to break rank and throw myself onto the barbed wire. Deep down, I was saying goodbye to my father, to the whole universe, and against my will, I found myself whispering the words, Yiskadal, Ve'yiskadash Shmei Rabbah. May his name be exalted and sanctified. My heart was about to burst. There, I was face to face with the angel of death. No. 2 steps from the pit, we were ordered to turn left and herded into barracks. I squeezed my father's hand. He said, do you remember Mrs. Schachter in the train? Think about that. Highlight that line, right? In your chapter 2 annotations, you were supposed to put, why do you think she saw the flames before there was any evidence of the crematorium? How do you think she saw that? Okay. Okay, I'm going to continue. Never shall I forget that night, the first night in camp, that turned my life into one long night, 7 times sealed. Never shall I forget that smoke. Never shall I forget the small faces of the children whose bodies I saw transformed into smoke under a silent sky. Never shall I forget those flames that consumed my faith forever. There we have another mention of a change in his faith right there. Never shall I forget the nocturnal silence that deprived me for all eternity of the desire to live. Never shall I forget those moments that murdered my God and my soul and turned my dreams to ashes. Never shall I forget those things, even were I condemned to live as long as God Himself. Never. The barrack we had been assigned to was very long. On the roof, a few bluish skylights. I thought, this is what the antechamber of hell must look like. So many crazed men, so much shouting, so much brutality. Dozens of inmates were there to receive us, sticks in hand, striking anywhere, anyone, without reason. The orders came. Strip! Hurry up! Rouse! Hold on only to your belt and your shoes. Now, go back to this first sentence, right, where it says dozens of inmates were there to receive us, striking, sticks in hand, striking anywhere, anyone, without reason. So these inmates are fellow Jews, right? So think about that, okay? All right, next. Our clothes were to be thrown on the floor at the back of the barrack. There was a pile there already. New suits, old ones, torn overcoats, rags. For us, it meant true equality, nakedness. We trembled in the cold. A few SS officers wandered through the room, looking for strong men. If vigor was that appreciated, perhaps one should try to appear sturdy. My father thought the opposite. Better not to draw attention. We later found out that he had been right. Those who were selected that day were incorporated into the Sonder Commando, the commando working in the crematoria. Belikatz, the son of an important merchant of my town, had arrived in Birkenau with the first transport, 1 week ahead of us. When he found out that we were there, he succeeded in slipping us a note. He told us that having been chosen because of his strength, he had been forced to place his own father's body into the furnace. The blows continued to rain on us. I can't even imagine what that young man, what that was like for him, right? But here we see a second example of kindness in that he warned them. He didn't have to warn them. Nobody warned him, right? He had to find out the hard way. But he shows kindness to um, to Elie and his father so that they can make a better choice. Now, one of the things you can link that back to is possibly Elie Wiesel's status in the community. It says he was highly esteemed, he was respected, and people, all of them, sought his advice. So maybe that is why um, Bella Katz returned that. He was returning a favor because of who he was. Okay. The blows continued to rain on us. To the barber! Belt and shoes in hand, I let myself be dragged along to the barber's. Their clippers tore out our hair, shaved every hair on our bodies. My head was buzzing, the same thought surfacing over and over, not to be separated from my father. Freed from the barber's clutches, we began to wonder about the crowd, finding friends, acquaintances. Every encounter filled us with joy. Yes, joy. Thank God, you are still alive. Some were crying. They used whatever strength they had left to cry. Why had they let themselves be brought here? Why didn't they die in their beds? Their words were interspersed with sobs. Mia, will you let the dogs in? Sorry, my dogs are barking. Suddenly, someone threw his arms around me in a hug. Yehil, the Segeter Reb's brother. He was weeping bitterly. I thought he was crying with joy at still being alive. Don't cry, Yale, I said. Don't waste your tears. Not cry. We're on the threshold of death. Soon we shall be inside. Do you understand? Inside. How could I not cry? I watched darkness fade through the bluish skylights in the roof. I no longer was afraid. I was overcome by fatigue. The absent no longer entered our thoughts. One spoke of them. Who knows what happened to them? But their fate was not on our minds. We were incapable of thinking. Our senses were numbed. Everything was fading into a fog. We no longer clung to anything. The instincts of self preservation, of self defense, of pride had all deserted us. In one terrifying moment of lucidity, I thought of us as damned souls wandering through the void, souls condemned to wander through space until the end of time, seeking redemption, seeking oblivion, without any hope of finding either. So, sorry, my dogs are so loud. As I read this, there are several things that that I notice and that I've underlined in my book, right? Those two sentences, I no longer was afraid, I was overcome by fatigue. So, can you think of any time in your life where um, where you were so exhausted, emotionally exhausted or mentally drained, right? That you can't feel, you can't react because you are so overcome, you're so fatigued. Think about that. That's going to be important in the class discussion. Okay. And then another thing um, that I underlined, those sentences, we were incapable of thinking, our senses were numbed, everything was fading into a fog, we no longer clung to anything. The instincts of self preservation, of self defense, of pride had all deserted us, right? So everything now is gone. We talked about that hope that they had before, right? Where is that now? Is that gone? We will find out, right? But as of right now, they are just drained. Okay. I also put at this point, we know they are naked. They have been shaved. They have been stripped and separated and gone through all of these things, right? So they have been stripped of dignity. They have been stripped of their humanity, right? Treated like animals right now. I made that comment in my book that they have been stripped of dignity and humanity. Okay, I'm going to continue. Around 5 o'clock in the morning, we were expelled from the barrack. The capos were beating us again, but I no longer felt the pain. A glacial wind was enveloping us. We were naked, holding our shoes and belts. An order, run! And we ran. After a few minutes of running, a new barrack. A barrel of foul smelling liquid stood by the door. Disinfection. Everybody soaked in it. Then came a hot shower, all very fast. As we left the showers, we were chased outside and ordered to run some more. Another barrack. The storeroom. Very long tables, mountains of prison garb. As we ran, they threw the clothes at us, pants, jackets, shirts. In a few seconds, we had ceased to be men. This is an important sentence here, right? In a few seconds, we had ceased to be men. I want your reaction to this. I want you to highlight this sentence, underline it, okay? Had the situation not been so tragic, we might have laughed. We looked pretty strange. Meerkats, a colossus, wore a child's pants, and Stern, a skinny little fellow, was floundering in a huge jacket. We immediately started to switch. I glanced over at my father. How changed he looked. His eyes were veiled. I wanted to tell him something, but I didn't know what. The night had passed completely. The morning star shone in the sky. I too had become a different person. The student of Talmud, the child I was, had been consumed by the flames. All that was left was a shape that resembled me. My soul had been invaded and devoured by a black flame. So here we have another instance where he refers back to his faith, right, with Talmud. Okay, so that's an important thing to highlight and then make a note about his faith at this point in time. So many events had taken place in just a few hours that I had completely lost all notion of time. When had we left our homes? And the ghetto? And the train? Only a week ago? One night? One single night? How long had we been standing in the freezing wind? 1 hour? A single hour? 60 minutes? Surely it was a dream. Okay, I am going to stop there for the end of chapter 3, part 1. Chapter 3, part 2 will pick up with the last half of this page.